Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey, all you porcupines, this is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you for, we're going to call this episode 61. In retrospect, it's going to be similar in some ways to episode 60.5 we did last week, in that we've been so busy with Liberty Forum that we didn't get a guest lined up this week, but we still do have some great content for you. I'm going to be, in a little bit, we'll be showing you video of a panel discussion that I was on at the Young Americans for Liberty regional convention down in Atlanta. This has come up as a topic on a few recent episodes. If you've been following along, I had recently guest on Jack Hunter and JP Cortez. They were both on this panel with me. So you'll get to see the panel discussion we were talking about in those episodes. Before we get there, though, there's we call this show the Porcupine Report. So I always want to make sure I'm doing at least a little reporting and not just interviewing. So here's some reporting. First of all, the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, tremendous success. Thank you to everyone who came out and participated. We had close to 300 in attendance, which is quite a bit more than our original goal. We thought, all right, can we get 200 people here? Look, we understand New Hampshire Liberty Forum, putting on a conference like this does cost a little bit of money. We're contracting with a venue. There's a lot of food. So the ticket prices are a little bit higher than something you might find for Pork Fest, for example. But people came out, and we had nearly 300 there. About a third of those who attended were from outside New Hampshire, which is, of course, a big part of our mission and our goal. Get those folks in the Liberty diaspora to come and experience and taste New Hampshire and see what we're building here. I will tell you, I had so many great conversations with folks who are from away and were coming to visit. Now, some of you, some of them I found out are listeners to this show or watchers of this show. So if that's you, it was great to see you. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for letting me know that you're out there watching, that you enjoy this show every single week as we bring it to you every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Facebook, on X, on Spotify, on YouTube, on other podcasting platforms. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for giving me direct feedback. Every week as we put out this show, I can see the numbers that people are watching, but I don't necessarily get direct feedback like I did this weekend. So that was very, very wonderful. Thank you very much. Also, it was great. A lot of those folks are also patrons of the Free State Project, and they're told me they feel like they're getting good value for their participation and support of the patron program. We did just, in fact, very recently, I think actually I have it here, we released our first print quarterly patron newsletter. This is one of our promises we make to all of our patrons, from our lowest level patrons who are doing just $100 a year to our highest level patrons doing $10,000 a year. We release not just our weekly email newsletter that goes out to everyone who signed up for it, but for our patrons, we have an exclusive print newsletter that's going to go out quarterly. In this quarter's newsletter, we highlighted the total death of the income tax in New Hampshire. We highlighted the Free Ross movement coming to fruition, our expeditions to the Students for Liberty, LibertyCon this past February, Porcupine Day, Liberty Forum, what to expect at Pork Fest, excerpts from an interview I did with Tom Woods on this very program, actually, where he did confirm that he is in fact planning his move to New Hampshire. He's got a long time horizon, but he is planning it. And a summary of so many of the media opportunities that we've had over the last quarter. So if you want to get a print newsletter like this right in the mail, direct from me 4 times a year with highlights on what's going on with the Free State Project, then you can become a patron. go to fsp.org, click on the donate button. It'll send you to the patron page, and you'll see all the different benefits you can get from being a Porcupine patron, including one of these great Porcupine patron pins. And I will tell you, at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, it was so great to see so many people walking around with these pins and people asking, those look pretty nifty. How do I get one? We had a couple new patron signups while we were there, which we appreciate very much. Thank you to our patrons who help sustain the operations of the Free State Project throughout the year. Now, I will say, at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, the format was a little differently this year. Usually, at least Liberty Forums that I've gone to, there's oftentimes multiple events going on at the same time. And they're different in terms of subject matter, but the format is generally the same. Two people talking for an hour, or maybe there's panels and these kind of blocks. What we did this year, and I think feedback I got was it worked very well, is we had our new dialogue, Liberty for Real dialogue series. We had 10 scheduled, and the feedback was great on these. We had individuals who had done deep dives, written papers about a problem facing kind of the road to implementation of building free societies, and how do we work to overcome that challenge? What are some potential solutions to that, with opportunity for brainstorming and small group discussion on how do we improve these ideas. The response was fantastic. People loved it. I'm fairly certain we are bringing that back again next year. So I already heard from a lot of people who said, boy, I wish I could have done a dialogue. Well, people didn't totally understand the format as we were putting it together, but now that people have experienced it, I think a lot of people are excited. So those folks, if you attended and participated in a dialogue and you think that you might like to do one next year, now's a great time to start thinking on what that might be. So we certainly are looking for more. And in fact, we are already at work planning our Liberty Forum for next year. We're in the early stages. We're going to be looking to kind of set a date and all that. Expect to have an announcement on that by PorcFest. But the dialogue series was wonderful. And the main stage, we had a main stage where things moved a little faster. Sometimes speakers got 20 minutes rather than a full hour, with keynote speakers sometimes getting a half an hour or sometimes a little bit more. And that kept moving. So there was less opportunity for kind of questions and back and forth, but I think a lot of people did appreciate the contrast in the two things, that you could get kind of the more rapid fire main stage talks. And if you wanted to continue the conversation, there were plenty of spaces where people could, after their talks, kind of go and talk with people further. Anyway, it was a great success. Thank you to all who came out. And some highlights, I will note, got a great response from Angela McCardle's keynote talk about how the details went down for sealing the deal on the pardon for Ross Ulbricht. Of course, the Free State Movement played a very large role, especially early on, in the formation of that Free Ross movement. And Angela McCardle, to give her credit, she did help seal the deal with the Trump administration to get that pardon. And some people were moved to tears in that room hearing the story and how it played out and how Ross got his freedom back. We were glad to welcome Jeff Deist as our VIP keynote speaker at our Saturday dinner, and so many more speakers were there. I will tell you, you can expect to see video from our main stage talks and our talks that also happened, our VIP keynote. Those will be coming out starting next week. We are going to be releasing them over time. We're a volunteer-driven organization, so we are going to be processing. We're already starting to process those, and they will be released. But if you're following the Free State Project on our social media pages, on Facebook, on X, on YouTube, you can expect starting next week to start seeing some of those talks come out, and we'll keep releasing them until they're all out. So look for that. And thank you again to everyone who came out for the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. And especially thank you to all of our volunteers, all of our producers. Big shout out to my co-producer, Brent Tweed. We were reunited on this project. We haven't worked together so directly in 13 years since we took over the Maine Republican Party on the Ron Paul campaign in 2012. You can check out my talk at PorcFest from last year if you want to know more about that. So big shout out to Brent Tweed for his work as co-producing this event, and shout out to all of our volunteers who made it happen. So speaking of events, of course, Liberty Forum is done, but PorcFest is just around the corner. We're only 6 weeks away, actually. This is a bit of a quirk of our calendar this year because we moved Liberty Forum forward into the spring this year, which was a big success. It also does mean there's a little bit of a compression in time between our events. And if you have not gotten your PorcFest tickets now, I really encourage you to do so. Who's coming to PorcFest? Here's a couple of the folks. Joel Salatin, Connor Boyack, Corey DeAngelis, Scott Horton, Dr. Bob Murphy, Hannah Cox, Jack Hunter, Jacob Hornberger, David Friedman, Matt Kibbe, Clifton Duncan, Dr. Simon Godek, and many, many more. Hopefully you. I mean, if you missed PorcFest, if you've never been to PorcFest, are you even a real libertarian? This is an important rite of passage. If you call yourself by the libertarian moniker and you haven't been to PorcFest, you're missing some credibility there. So come on out. Taste the Revolution this June 16th through the 22nd. Get your tickets at porcfest.com. And I will tell you, tickets right now are $100. That's for adults. Child tickets are much cheaper. I want to say like $5. Anyway, we have a lot of great programming for kids. Bring your kids. Connor Boyack is going to be reading the Tuttle Twins to them. So, and a lot of other things we're looking forward to at our Porcupines Pavilion. But right now, tickets are $100. You can get 10% off with my discount code that I'm giving you, Granite Gulch. That'll bring your ticket price down to $90. But I have to warn you, ticket prices are going up. 1 month out from PorcFest, ticket prices are going up from $100 to $125. So you're in a narrow window right now. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, go to porcfest.com, P-O-R-C, not P-O-R-K. It's a freedom festival, not a barbecue festival, though we will have some great barbecue and some great food this year as we taste the revolution. But porcfest.com, pork with a C, not a K. Get your tickets now. Don't wait. Use my discount code Granite Gulch, 10% off. If you wait until after May 15th, you're going to be paying $125. My discount code will still work for 10% off, but you're going to be paying more. So be sure to get those tickets now at porcfest.com. Additional things I want to mention for events that are going on this week. If you happen to be in the Free State, as I know many of you are, a lot of folks try to stay connected with the Free State movement from away by watching this show. But also we have a lot of folks who are active participants, and I want to let you know about a few events that are coming up this week. Tomorrow, May 1st, Thursday, we have our Dover Liberty Outreach. I try to get to those. Sometimes I'm busy, even though it's right in my area. I live in Dover. Actually, it's going to be held in Somersworth. That's where but it's right next door. Anyway, so I may or may not be there, but good people will be there tomorrow, Thursday, May 1st, for the Dover Liberty Outreach meetup. Friday, we have our New Movers Potluck at the Quill. I know there's going to be some new movers there, including we're glad to welcome our communications director, Magdalene, who recently made the move from Tennessee to the Free State. And she is, we're really glad to have her. She's been helping us a lot with a lot of those great video clips. You're seeing the small video clips that you see on our social media pages. That's a lot of Magdalene's work. She's also been helping to do the first drafts of our newsletters. As of course the newsletters do. I do play a big role in writing those myself, but she helps get those first drafts together. She's been a real force multiplier for our communications efforts here at the Free State Project. And hopefully you've noticed this year, I know a lot of people have told me that they have, that we have drastically increased our communications with all of our participants and all of our folks who are interested out there in the Liberty diaspora on our lists. So thank you, Magdalene, for all of her work. We're looking forward to formally welcoming you at the New Mover Party this Friday. I will be there, and you should maybe come out and join us too. It is a potluck. Bring a dish, and you get in for free. Otherwise, it's $10. So see you there on Friday. And speaking of New Movers parties, there's going to be another one. The monthly potluck at Bardo Farm in Croydon is also New Movers Party. That's going to be this Saturday, May 3rd. And if you're still feeling like you want to do another event, something a little different, this Sunday will be the Granite Ruck. People are going to be meeting up by the Garnet School. There's going to be some hiking and foraging. I keep telling myself I'm going to get to one of these. Maybe I will get to this one. I mean, the weather is beautiful now in New Hampshire. We are hitting spring, and boy, I expect it's going to be a beautiful day for a hike. So maybe I will manage to get there this Sunday, and maybe I'll see you there. Those are just a few events going on. And if you want details on those events, you can go to our community calendar at fsp.org. And you'll see not just these events, you'll see so many events. We have events that are going on in the Free State pretty much every single day, and multiple events most days even. So whether you're here in New Hampshire and you're looking for things to do, or you're exploring the idea, you're thinking about it, maybe one day coming to visit New Hampshire, go check out the community calendar and even just see the kinds of event offerings that are taking place on a daily basis in New Hampshire. You're not going to find anything like this for the liberty movement anywhere else in the country. This is one of the things that makes New Hampshire truly unique, is this strong, robust community that is putting on events all the time. So thank you to all of our community organizers. Boy, do we like being called a community organizer? I think that's what they called Barack Obama described himself as. Anyway, whatever you are, I think, people are organizing things in the community. Thank you to all of them for doing that. And that's the report for the week on some of the goings on in New Hampshire. Now I'd like to frame up what we're going to be watching next. Again, I mentioned I was at the Young Americans for Liberty Atlanta regional conference they were doing a series of regional conferences around the country. They just finished with their Washington, D.C. conference. I'm told that former Congressman Justin Amash was their keynote speaker there. That was going on the same weekend as Liberty Forum. So, smartly, they didn't invite me to that one. They invited me to the one down in Atlanta. And I had a real privilege. They asked me to be on a panel with Jack Hunter and JP Cortez to talk about the legacy of Ron Paul. Not just kind of his personal legacy and our admiration for the man, but the impact that what he did is still having on everything that's going on today in the liberty movement. So many of the successes that are happening in state legislatures around the country, some of the injection of certain ideas that have become more and more mainstream in the Republican Party, including skepticism about overseas foreign wars that are undeclared by Congress, and other things along the way. I would certainly, anyway, it was a real pleasure to be invited to participate in that, along with two friends of mine, JP Cortez, Jack Hunter. Again, you can go back and watch the episodes that I did with them recently. I will mention that both of them are coming to Pork Fest. We're looking forward to having them. And even the moderator on this panel, it's not totally confirmed yet, Sean Tima, the COO of Young Americans for Liberty. We've been talking with him about trying to get him to come out to Pork Fest. I don't know that he's been there before, even though he's a native Granite Stater. He grew up here. Now he's down in Austin, Texas, at the YAL office down there. But I'm grateful to Young Americans for Liberty for inviting me to speak. I will also mention that they were a sponsor of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, which we appreciate very much. And also, we're in talks for a sponsorship for Pork Fest. We're still working out the details there. Anyway, I don't know that I need to set up any more. Thank you so much. Here is my panel discussion with Jack Hunter and JP Cortez at the Young Americans for Liberty Atlanta Conference on the legacy of Dr. Ron Paul.
We're about to hear from some people who were in the thick of the Ron Paul revolution in 2008, 2012, and even beforehand, right? These are people who, because of their work in 2008, in 2012, and beforehand, we owe it to them because they cast the future that we have now built and you are now a part of. And we're going to talk about all things Ron Paul revolution here. So in no particular order, you already heard from Jack Hunter how he wrote for the Washington Examiner, the American Conservative, appeared on Bill Maher, wrote for the Daily Beast, Politico, and co-wrote The Tea Party Goes to Washington with Senator Rand Paul. We're also going to hear from Eric Brakey, who is the executive director of the New Hampshire-based Free State Project, whose goal is to attract all the libertarians and get them to move to New Hampshire. Now, I grew up in New Hampshire, and I kind of wish I didn't, because then I'd be more excited to move back there. But, I want to move back home. Brakey, keep working me. He began in politics as the main state director for Ron Paul's 2012 campaign, and at 26, became the youngest state senator in the U.S., and he is the reason that Maine has constitutional carry, right to try, welfare reform, and medical cannabis expansion. He's a good dude. And he also served from 2020 to 2022 as a national spokesperson for YAL, so former coworker. Great dude. Rounding us off, we've got JP Cortez, Executive Director of the Sound Money Defense League, a nationally renowned policy group known for its fervent commitment to advocating for a stable and constitutional monetary policy. Because guess what? The government is weakening our dollar. Great dude. Let's bring them all on stage to talk about some Ron Paul. Come on down, gents.
Come together.
Take a seat, any seat.
Right now.
All right.
All right.
So before we begin, is this good placement? Should I move my chair at all? This is fine.
You're
okay,
all right.
Thank you. Great. All right, gents. So, Jack, I'm going to kick it off with you. We were just talking backstage about what a world would look like if Ron Paul had never ran for president. Not to start with the negative, but let's visualize that for a second, because I think sometimes we take for granted, right?
We do. That's a great question. That's exactly why I wanted to lead with. What would it look like in a Ron Paulist world, a world that wasn't affected by his significant impact influence? So the first thing I want to say today is, when Rand Paul decided that he was going to run for the U.S. Senate, he had two announcements, one in Kentucky, obviously, and because of his father's movement, this was 2010, this was 2 years after the 2008 election, he wanted to make a national statement. Rand Paul announced he was running for the U.S. Senate on the Rachel Maddow show. I don't know if any of you are aware of that or understand why that makes any big lick of sense whatsoever, but that's what he had to do. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, any major conservative figure did not want the son of Ron Paul on their show. They were against Ron Paul. They would say things like, he's not a real Republican. And they certainly didn't want his son there, and they certainly didn't want his son in the Senate. When he ran for the Senate that year, Dick Cheney and Rudy Giuliani endorsed Rand Paul's primary opponent in the Republican primary. That's how bad they didn't want anything related to Ron Paul in their party, and that being something, being a factor. That all relates to Ron Paul in 2008, and I don't think a lot of people, especially if you're younger, there's no reason you would know this, how radical him injecting himself in that 2008 race was as the anti-war, legitimately fiscally conservative, libertarian Republican in that race that energized so many and brought thousands, and it's what we're going to talk about tonight. But that was a different world. The idea that the son of Ron Paul would have to go on Rachel Maddow to have a national voice. We're not in that world anymore, and that's a good thing. And Ron Paul and his movement got a lot to do with that.
Very good. Excellent. Now, Mr. Brakey, Senator Brakey, Executive Director Brakey. You have so many, the Honorable Brakey. Which title do you like the best,
I think 1 year when I was at Yale, I got a Yaldi for how many titles I had, even in my time at Yale. So
that's telling.
Anyway,
yes.
the ever-shifting titles of Eric Brakey.
You know the Dundies from The Office? We've done the Yaldis historically. We should probably bring them back. We haven't done them in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But why don't you speak to how Dr. Paul, if he affected your decision to run for office and become the youngest state senator?
Well, yeah, it was a big part of my decision. I often think that one of the most important things that Ron Paul did beyond running for president and his 40 years in office was how he concluded his time in office and how he finished his last presidential campaign. In that so many people who'd been activated and part of this new resurgence of this American libertarian movement, after Ron said there were going to be no more campaigns from him, so many people went to him and asked, Dr. Paul, tell me what to do. I want to be involved. I want to make a difference. I want to keep fighting for liberty. Tell me what to do. And Ron said, I don't know what you should do. You got to figure that out for yourself. There's a job out there for you, but Ron is no central planner. And he told the people, you got to figure it out. And there were so many different paths people could take. I know a lot of people who decided to go and try to fight to end the Fed by pioneering Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And those folks, kind of inspired by Dr. Paul, have revolutionized the monetary world. I know folks who went into, they just decided they were going to build homeschooling networks and do all sorts of ways to advance the cause of liberty. But for me, I saw the opportunity from the crash course in politics I'd had on the Ron Paul campaign to run for office. And I will say, looking back on it, it was a little bit of a naive reason to run for office, but I knew that when Ron wasn't running again, and there was a lot of excitement about Rand Paul running in 2016, and I thought, all right, I want to help Rand Paul become the next president of the United States, and I thought, I will be much more effective at helping him as a state senator than I would as just some guy. So anyway, of all the naive reasons to run for state senate, but I guess it is valuable to note that, we every step along the way, you had I had these big goals: make Ron Paul president of the United States, make Rand Paul president of the United States, and in many ways we fell short of all those goals. But there were so many other things we achieved along the way, from constitutional carry sweeping the country, as was mentioned before, to all these liberty legislators elected, to the Bitcoin revolution, and all of that really comes back to Ron Paul and the movement of young people that he energized and excited and sent them on their way to carry the torch and fight for freedom the best way that they could find how.
Awesome. Very good, very good. Now, JP, you're running the Sound Money Defense League, and Jack talked about the anti-war principles that Dr. Paul had ran on, and he was a disruptor, and he was also a disruptor in being one of the only people to talk about our currency. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, Ron in relation to Sound Money, what Sound Money Defense League does, and why that was so significant, then and now for him to talk about sound money in a presidential campaign?
Well, I think I'll start at the beginning. I grew up in an apolitical home. I was not interested in politics. I was suspicious, of course, of people who tell me that they're in charge, but I didn't have strong political opinions until I got to my senior year in high school, so probably not much younger than many people in the crowd here. And for my government class, the assignment was to select a federally elected politician and to present on them. As someone without much in the way of interest in this field, I told the teacher that I didn't care, I didn't have a politician queued up, and I encouraged her to choose one for me. The politician that she chose was Ron Paul, a congressman from Texas.
Wow, good teacher.
This was in 2011, right around, the 2008 movement had already happened, and I was a freshman in high school. I was 15 years old. Coming into 2011, what was an innocuous school assignment, led to a deep dive into ending the Fed, into Ron Paul, into being anti-war. Ultimately, that led me to the Mises Institute. When I got my degree at Auburn, I spent a lot of time. I should have been paying them rent with as much time as I was spending at the Mises Institute. But all of that stems from Ron Paul, and without Ron Paul, my initiation into this wouldn't have happened. So fast forward all of this time later, where the Sound Money Defense League has now been around for 11 years. Coming out of college, we started this project to remonetize gold and silver. What we found was that if given the choice, you might find that people would prefer a money that holds its value over one that doesn't. And the reality is that none of us woke up and chose to use the dollar this morning. The reality is that we're trapped through taxes and through regulations. There aren't really a lot of monetary alternatives that we have. And of course, this is so important, as Ron Paul championed, the fraud that is the Federal Reserve note is the fraud that enables all of the other fraud. The original counterfeit of money is what allows a government to fight wars of choice all across the world. It allows a bureaucracy to continue to grow. And so sound money is such an important part of a necessary condition to a libertarian, a liberty-minded society. And none of this would have happened without Dr. Paul's influence. He didn't just teach me about sound money, he completely rewired my thinking to understand the power of individuality and the importance of accountability, taking responsibility for your own life, not having a system where governments or politicians, expedient politicians, will devalue the money for purposes that they choose without consent of the governed. So Ron Paul, and obviously the Sound Money Defense League and what we do and the entire Sound Money movement, more than ever before, we're having conversations about America's money. This is a dinner time conversation in large part because inflation is no longer deniable. These are people sitting around their dinner table saying, wait, why are things more expensive than they were before? And of course, this is Misesian. Mises himself spoke about how a studious housewife is often a better indicator of inflation and the cost of living than these cooked government statistics. And so I don't want to diatribe too much, but Ron Paul ultimately planted in me a seed that encouraged me to graduate from college, start this organization, or rather be empowered to take this organization and take it to new heights. And that wouldn't have happened without Ron Paul. And I think importantly, I don't mean to cast any shade on the people here on stage next to me, but these two fellows are older than I am. And frankly, Ron Paul influenced them, and they influenced me. I'm on stage right now with people that I came up looking up to. So it's not just this. Ron Paul started with people older than me, people younger than me, and it all trickles down. And the goal, I think, is for everyone in this room to understand the influence and the power that Ron Paul and Ron Paul's message had across the United States and across the world.
Awesome. That's great. It's funny you talk about, throwing shade and being old. You said, I was a freshman in 2011. I was like, oh, wow, this guy's so young. Then I thought, well, 31 and 29 isn't that different. We're just all old now, compared to these guys. So that's life. I'll kick this one to Jack, and if anyone wants to chime in, I'm curious on your insight. So Ron Paul ran for president thrice, 1988, 2008, and 2012. I was curious if you could talk about, the distinctions between each campaign and, things that might either easily come to mind or not easily come to mind.
Well, I was around in 88, but I was in middle school and not worrying about this political stuff. But you would get in the 08 campaign and even the 12 campaign, people that, because I worked for Ron Paul's 2012 campaign and introduced him multiple times in South Carolina in 08 when I was at talk radio. You would get people who voted for him as the LP candidate in 88, and they'd come up and tell you that, and it was like a badge of honor, like, see all this going on? I was cool before, so I thought that was pretty cool. They were distinct. In 08, he was just like this person that burst onto the scene and shocked everybody's system in a positive way for us libertarians. By 2012, he was more established. The Tea Party had kind of happened, which he had a lot to do with. So they were different. What I want to emphasize is how fun, especially both campaigns, but 08, it was just so brand new and how fun it was. And if you weren't there, you don't know. I was there. You had the money bombs that were record breaking. He raised $1 million on November. Remember the 5th of November?
Yeah. Early stage internet. He was a master of.
Yeah, this is just people on like Ron Paul forums going, on this day we're going to raise money and sharing it on whatever social looked like then. I think Twitter. What's that?
The Daily Paul.
Daily Paul, right? Ron Paul Forest. Was it? There was a couple of them.
Slay a Dragon for Ron. If you remember
yes,
that one. Yeah.
But there was all these grassroots sites, populism before the current iteration, just organic things happening. And he would have these money bombs. The first one was like over $1 million. It broke records. The second one was double that. It did more and more. Do you remember the Liberty Grannies?
I mean, I remember them in the documentary on the
Yeah, they were these two elderly ladies.
That Jack was in that documentary, by the way. You should see it.
But they drove around in an RV with Ron Paul stuff all over it to his different, campaign stops, and would give people like water if it was hot and stuff. The Liberty Grannies. The blimp. Do you remember the blimp? I rode in the blimp. Some, supporters at the grassroots level put their money together and had a blimp. And I was on the radio, and we promoted their blimp, and I rode in the blimp. Just, who does that? That's crazy. Yeah. But it was all just super enthusiasm for Ron Paul, and then the enthusiasm was for his ideas. Look, I can compare it to Bernie Sanders in this way, and don't get mad at me. Ron Paul even said this when Bernie Sanders was a big thing. People wanted somebody with integrity. They wanted somebody who wasn't part of the Washington machine and full of it, quite frankly. And when people saw Ron Paul on saying what he was saying in the 08 race, beginning in the 08 race, and then for a number of years to come, they saw somebody that was unlike anybody else on that debate stage and unlike most in Washington, all in Washington except for him for the most part. And I think that's what resonated with them. With Bernie later, when all the young people flocked to him, he was kind of that outcast, outlier guy. Socialism sucks, he sucks, not saying that, but it is that sort of dynamic. That Ron Paul has said that people just want somebody that's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I think that was a big part of it. That gives you a little flavor of what '08 was like.
Yeah, and all that, it is interesting, first of all, listening to what JP said. I think that, I often think of the Ron Paul liberty movement as it came on in waves, right? Mm-hmm. Jack was a part of that first wave in the 2008 campaign. Right. I came in like the Tea Party and the lead into the 2012 campaign, kind of wave two. Sounds like maybe that's where JP kind of was still in high school, maybe couldn't get too active back then, but there was very much a different orientation, or particularly between the 2008 and 2012 campaigns. So the 2000, I guess we applaud that, yeah. But the 2008 campaign was very. They were both defined by the grassroots and grassroots empowerment. But the 2008 campaign was a lot of really enthusiastic people who had no idea how to win an election. But boy, God love them. Like, we raise $1 million to put a blimp in the sky. Yeah. It says Google Ron Paul.
Why not?
Right? Or people kind of go on bike tours across America, handing out constitutions, telling people about Ron Paul, like my friend Michael Moresco did. But a lot of those same people were involved in 2012, having learned the lesson of 2008, that raw enthusiasm is not enough. We need to know tactics, we need to know strategy, we need to know how this election system actually works, and we need to know how to professionalize. We need to be able to maybe internalize a little bit the lesson of, if you want to get a radical agenda done, it helps to not look like a radical. It helps to cut your hair and put on a suit and look like a respectable professional individual when you tell people that we need to abolish the Federal Reserve and bring all the troops home from the wars. If you're smelling like pot and yeah. If you're smelling like pot and you look like a hippie and you say we got to end the wars and end the Fed, people are like, oh, there's one of those people again. Yeah. But that lesson that was learned in the 2012 campaign, I think, is very much the lesson that also went on to make Young Americans for Liberty the very effective institution that it is today. The lesson that we have to know how to be professional and focused and actually work with effective strategies, understanding the mechanics of the political system as it actually is, not as we wish it to be, to create the change. Now, I remember in 2012, this was the year we actually won several states. I was the state director in Maine. We won the state of Maine. We won all the delegates to the National Convention. But we also saw firsthand how corrupt the political establishment was. That we won several states fair and square, but the Mitt Romney campaign and the RNC didn't like that. They didn't like that Ron Paul had enough states to have his name entered into nomination. And so they arbitrarily went in and disqualified delegates and kicked a bunch of us out of the convention. I had my delegate credentials stripped away from me, and they were given to a Mitt Romney supporter that nobody elected and nobody voted for. But that was the power of the establishment in those days. But here's the real wonderful, delicious irony of it all. In the state of Maine, we won the state for Ron Paul. We had this thing called unbound delegates. Mitt Romney won this beauty contest preference poll that didn't actually count for anything, and we won the delegates, which was what mattered. Well, Mitt Romney complained, it's not fair, I won the beauty contest, I should get the delegates. And so they rammed through at the RNC these rules changes that required all delegates to be bound going forward. And you know what? 4 years later, that same establishment realized they really screwed up because it meant that they had all these people elected who hated Donald Trump as delegates, but they were bound to Donald Trump. And then suddenly they were trying to unwind the rules that they pushed through because they were unhappy with the delegates in Maine voting for Ron Paul. So they got hoisted by their own petard. And I think if there is ever a sign that there is a God, it was watching the Republican establishment get what was coming to them. So
nice.
In more ways than one, the Ron Paul revolution led to Donald Trump being president today, and for the good and bad of that. But I don't think the establishment would have been toppled in 2016 if it wasn't for what was done
with the Ron Paul revolution
100%.
in 2012.
Yeah. That's great. Now, JP, so, you talking about being so young and everything reminds me of when I was young. I was working at the winery for a summer in New Hampshire. I was delivering wine like 4 a.m, like wholesale. And my trainer was like one of those like crystal women. You know the crystal people, right? And, she was telling me she's a big Ron Paul fan. And she goes, Ron's the light, man. He's the light, right? So you had like, the crystal people like in Ron. You had
Crystal light.
Exactly, yes, crystal light. No, like the salt, the salt lamps, that kind of crystal. Not meth. So then you had like deep like Bible Belt social conservatives who were also for Ron, and he really, what I think stood out about him is the coalition that he had assembled. And so I'm curious, what's your take on how he was able to thread that needle and unite so many people of so many different backgrounds, creeds? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think Dr. Paul is an excellent communicator of these ideas, and I think that one of the things he did that is very interesting, and the history here is interesting, is Dr. Paul's ability to synthesize. Dr. Paul may be one of the first times in American political history, I guess you can go back to some of the paleo-conservatives, but this idea that you can synthesize libertarian theory with Austrian free market economics and that be palatable to the average person, to boil it down, not in a way that requires you to understand supply and demand graphs, not in a way that forces you to work through regressions, but rather through deductive reasoning, through axiomatic thinking, which is what the Austrians prescribe. That itself, reasoning from first principles, lends you and leads to a much clearer explanation of why the world is the way that it is. So Dr. Paul's ability to communicate this is huge. Dr. Paul also had something that is not common even today, and that is an ability to incite grassroots. More than anything, as it pertains to the Sound Money Defense League, the single biggest tool that we have in our tool belt, more than me putting a suit on, more than me having these fancy arguments as to why sound money is important, is people in the state choosing to pick up and fight for things that they believe in. You don't have, the truth is that you have very little power in Washington, D.C. You can call your congressman, you can email them, an aide might get the message, they might pass it up to the congressman, you might or might not get a response back. But that's kind of the way it ends there. On the state level, in Nashville, in Atlanta, in Boise, Idaho, in Lincoln, Nebraska, you have power at the state level. And it takes a handful of phone calls and emails to affect that power. So I guess part of this is I encourage all of you to understand that you have incredible power at the state level, and I encourage all of you to use it for any liberty-minded thing that you believe is worthwhile. So don't write off the political process entirely, and that's part of the message I think that Dr. Paul taught me. Another part being, Dr. Paul was the first one to tell you, don't go into politics. Don't be a politician. There are a million ways to solve the problems that we're faced with today. The answer can't be politics. This is the very institution that caused these problems. So start a business, start an organization, figure out ways to affect change that don't involve the political, directly going into politics. And I say this next to literally one of the most effective state legislators that maybe has ever existed, that certainly I have ever had the pleasure of working with, that we worked with in Maine on some of these liberty legislation. So I think, lastly, I think that one of the big things, Ron Paul left a blueprint. And there are a lot of different ways to view and affect in your own life the messages, the path that he left. But for our purposes, among the most important is the work that he did at the federal level on sound money. Some of you may have heard over the last couple of weeks, over the last month or so, Elon Musk and President Donald Trump and some of these others tweeting and talking about America's gold. There are mysteries surrounding America's gold. Is it in Fort Knox? Is it not? Unsurprisingly, Ron Paul started this. The original Audit the Gold bill was originally sponsored by Ron Paul. Ron Paul originally held the Gold Commission that answered all of these questions, that originally asked all of these questions. So taking the blueprint that he built And now I'm going to break a little news here, if that's okay. I haven't really talked about this publicly. There's a congressman from Kentucky, which I'm sure everyone in this room is a fan of, not Dr. Paul's son, another congressman from Kentucky, who is supposed to, this week, take up the mantle that Dr. Paul left and carry it forward by introducing an Audit the Gold bill, auditing America's gold holdings. There are...
It sounds a little extreme, guys.
There are a million legitimate questions about America's gold holdings, and to the extent that America and the Federal Reserve Note is the greatest monetary asset the world has ever seen, that it's a global reserve currency all over the world, confidence in America's dollars should be there, and we need to open those vault doors. And if not for Dr. Paul and his work in the late 70s and the 80s and the 90s and in the 2000s, this wouldn't be happening. So again, Dr. Paul left a blueprint, not just in the way he communicated, but in literally the way he legislated, that is an inspiration to many of us, and we've taken this mantle and continue to run it forward.
Awesome.
I want to follow up on what you asked, JP, and you are correct, he left the blueprint, but I want to speak about it in a different way. I think it was in the 2012 cycle that Ron Paul spoke at Liberty University, drew 10,000 young people, conservative Christian school. Some of you may be alumni there. And in the same week, he spoke at Berkeley in California and drew 10 to 12,000 young people. How do you do that as a Republican running for president? What other Republican running for president could do that? So I think part of the blueprint, and this has been part of our movement throughout, it is a defining aspect, is Ron's brazen radicalism. Eric is absolutely right that we learned some lessons in 2008 that helped us in 2012 about how to present some of these ideas and to be more professional and effective, most importantly. But what kicked off the Ron Paul movement, I'll never forget it, the date was May 15th, 2007. It was a debate stage, the 2008 Republican presidential primary, and many of you have probably seen this video. Good God, I don't know how many times I've written about this, but this is the night that the Ron Paul movement was kicked off. He was already running for president, no one was paying attention, and he proceeded to explain on that debate stage the concept of blowback, why 9/11 happened, and talked about our foreign intervention. It's a CIA term, blowback, he explained. And he had this detailed, we bomb over here, we do this, they don't want us in our countries, so that's why terrorism is visited upon us. This is the Bush-Cheney Republican Party he's running in. That dude's still president. That's what's going on. And everybody throughout media, I remember Michael Steele was one on Fox News, was like, that Ron Paul guy's done. You don't talk like that, in a Republican primary. Rudy Giuliani that night demanded an apology from Ron Paul. What did Dr. Paul do? He continued his explanation of the term blowback and what he was talking about. Didn't care, didn't flinch. It was so radical at that time in the Bush-Cheney party. All the media people were like, this guy's done. This is terrible. He's not even a Republican. The next debate was a Fox News debate. He got disinvited for his comments, for talking about that. What happened instead? The Ron Paul movement blew up, thousands flocked to him, and you have this organization here today. But it was his brazenness and his radicalness to do that, to go against the tide, to buck the system that got us there. I would argue today, not only the work we do here with YAL, but when Rand Paul and Thomas Massie are the only guys saying tariffs are bad in their party, or one of the few, and voting against it, that's a different version of that. When Thomas Massie alone among Republicans won't vote for a bill that's going to add to spending so much that Trump asked him to get kicked out of the GOP for the second time, that's that same spirit that Ron Paul always exhibited. So we must never lose that. That's what attracts people. It shows you that you're real, and we just happen to be right. So I want to throw that in there.
And Break, you got the last word.
Yeah, to build on that, I think kind of what made that moment so unique and what set Ron Paul apart from everyone else on that stage is, it's two steps. First is to know the truth, and the second is to tell the truth. And most of these politicians couldn't tell the truth because they don't know what it is, right? They are literally handed talking points by someone else, and they're just mouthpieces up there for some special interest group or another. And Like, you try to scratch past the surface of their talking points and you'll find out there's nothing there. But they can get through 30-second answers on a debate stage. They can't do that anymore in the era of podcasting, thank goodness, as Kamala Harris tried to do. Apparently couldn't. But Ron Paul, not only he studied Austrian economics, he studied all of these things very thoroughly. He knew his stuff. And in the moment when it counted, when everyone was watching, and every normal person would shrink away like a violet and say, "Oh, I didn't really mean that. I don't want to get canceled by Fox News and everyone up there." He wouldn't do it. He knew the truth, and he told the truth. And consequences come what may. And it turned out that the consequences were that he ignited a revolution, that he gave people permission to start asking questions, obvious questions that were right in front of us that nobody had the courage to ask because it wasn't on the 3x5 card of allowable public opinion that existed between MSNBC and Fox News in those days. Thankfully, those titans of corporate media do not have the stranglehold on our narratives like they did in 2008 and 2012. And some of you are probably so young that it's hard to imagine those days. Hard to imagine what it was like when the neoconservatives had total uniform control over what it meant to be a Republican, and it was reinforced every single night on Fox News by Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity. No longer. That genie is, what's the phrase? That
out of the
bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Toothpaste out of the tube?
I guess the toothpaste is out of the tube. Whatever. The cat's out of the bag. The genie's out of the bottle.
Genie's
the
out of the
toothpaste out of the tube. Boy, I'd be sorry. I feel bad for that genie being stuck in a toothpaste bottle. But there's no going back. And Ron Paul launched that revolution. He took up that torch of liberty. He carried it in a lonely way for 40 years until finally the brush fires of liberty took hold in the minds of so many, and he passed it on to all of us. So at this point, it is a multi-generational revolution. It is our job to continue carrying that forward in whatever capacity you do, whether that is as an activist, as someone who's pursuing liberty in completely non-political ways, or if you're unfortunate enough, like me, to be crazy enough to run for office and to get elected to office. I feel like the moment you step into that state house, you need to have like a wristband on that says, "What would Ron Paul do?" And anytime you have the establishment come and tell you what you should do, you need to look down at that wristband and ask yourself, what would Ron Paul do? Because for any liberty legislator, he should be your North Star.
Beautiful. I couldn't think of a better way to end. Let's give the panel a round of applause, everybody.
Hey, Sean.
Tremendous stuff.